It's
I
a
was
lot.
I'm hopefully going to be finishing up the audiobook. I've got the last file to
Good.
review. So my son was here and he recorded me sitting in front of our fireplace.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many times this is my book.
Hmm.
These are my words, and I'd be like, bloop, bloop, bloop.
You get your tongue tied. You get stumble
Everything's
over
a
your own
mouthful.
mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, tongue-tied is the word for it. Janet Nordine has lived in Las Vegas her entire life. She has a Bachelor of Science in Human Services Management, a Master of Science in Counseling, Marriage, Family, and Child Therapy. She's a registered play therapist supervisor, a trust based relational intervention practitioner. She works with children who have experienced sexual abuse and incorporates play therapy with children who are adopted and their families of origin. Janet incorporates interpersonal neurobiology and the bottom up approach with children and adolescents. I could talk about Janet all day. I'd rather hear from Janet herself. Janet, thank you for joining us in conversation with.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you again. And if anyone doesn't know, I'm going to put a link right at the top of this YouTube. And if you're watching it on YouTube, there'll be a little drop down that shows you where you can see Janet, me, Haley, and Ann Heffron all chatting away about a year ago. Do you remember that?
I do. It was the one before I discovered lighting.
You've done wonderfully since.
Yeah, I've changed. That whole conversation changed how I do any kind of online conversations or counseling. So
Well,
thanks for that.
it's wonderful to see you and to hear
Hmm.
you. We're going to talk a little bit about today, about a few things today, but I wanted to start out and just tell us a little bit about how you work with children and families of origin, as I just read, in the reunion process. Give us a little understanding of the basics of that.
Well, I do work with a lot of children who experience adoption and with their adoptive families. I am working with adult adoptees as well that are experiencing various experiences in their reunion life, and working with some families that have open adoptions where I've incorporated the biological family in with sessions, and it's been really good when people are open and able to welcome these people into their lives and in a safe way, in a safe environment, so the child can have contact. Um, I really find it to be healing for many, both the child and the parent, typically the biological mother joining in the session. I've had, I think, two or three of those in the past couple of years. And for me, just as a therapist, to see um, people's ability to connect in this way is really beautiful.
It's a wonderful word to use to connect because it's
Hmm.
the separation that we often talk about, isn't it? It's
Hmm. Yes.
there's phrases we use, catchphrases such as the primal wound, and theories that kind of
Hmm.
expand out from there. We talk about grief a lot. I'm gonna get there. Let's talk about the connection a little bit more. How do those connections happen? And I'm going to ask you to focus a little bit. And this is a real personal question for me because I'm in union and now reunion with
Yeah.
parts of my biological family. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some news that just is happening now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Talk about siblings. How do siblings, especially, I know you work with children, but let's just think
Hmm.
about maybe even adolescents or adults dealing with finding each other, looking at each other, seeing maybe for the first time a reflection of themselves.
Well, you're talking to someone that has 16 siblings. So, and I speak to two or three and not close. We're not super close. We text. Um, and it's difficult. We're all raised in different families, and I have siblings that never were adopted and they stayed in foster care their whole life, and they see me as like the lucky one that was adopted, and sure, I can understand that. Working with children that age out of foster care and in this day and age is hard, but I can't imagine in the age of the 60s and 70s how difficult that was for them. Um, I have siblings that were not raised by their family, that were put in other people's family within the kinship kind of situations. And it's just the best word I can come up with is messy. It feels messy. Um, I try to, in my mind, create this genogram of who fits where and who goes with what person and who raised whom. And it's confusing. And for kids that I work with, I've worked with children in foster care where there's sibling sets or 5 or 6 kids, and they're in different homes, and they get visits, and they call them visits. We're gonna go visit with our siblings, at the park for a few hours. And these are kids that were raised together in a traumatic environment, and they just get a visit at the park. To me, they need time to be together, to heal together, to talk about the hard stuff, even if it's through play, um, so that they can lead productive lives and not dwell in this trauma when they go to a visit. And then the foster parent says, well, 3 days after, they were just awful. Why are we doing these visits? These visits are important. We need to expand and do it differently.
I remember when when I was searching for my biological roots and for my biological mother specifically, there was a lot of search angels and other adoptees that were in
Hmm.
my life. One specifically, Michael Luck. I always call him Mr. Luck. I had Mr. Luck
Hmm.
in my life, and he had found and was in reunion with his parents and his siblings. He had found them, and when I was searching, and I wrote about this in the book. When I was searching, I didn't dare think about siblings. I didn't know if she was going to be there or not, or welcome me, my mother would be alive, or what the story would be. So I
Sure.
just took one step at a time. And then the problem was, of course, I found a grave. I found my mother. She had passed
Mhm.
away. But then I had 5 minutes to mourn her. And then I read the obituary and I had two brothers and a sister. And, my head just
Right.
fell off and spun. I called Michael Luck. And I
Hmm.
said, Michael, I don't know what to do. And then I asked him, what's it like for you? And he magically told me, he said, well, at first it's a lot of all this energy and there's these negotiations on who's what, where, when, how. And
Hmm.
then he said, eventually they became like almost every other sibling relationship. One I talk to, one doesn't return my calls, the other one I'm close to. And he negotiated that, of course, over time and came to a place of recognizing what you just said. It's messy.
Hmm.
We have a phrase now in the the 2021 era. We say it's complicated, but I like the word messy. How does
Hmm.
someone who lived a messy life like I did, drugs, alcohol, sexual abuse? I mean, I'm the kid I wished I had you when I was young, right? Where the heck were you when I was in the midst of this?
I don't know.
And right, and all the I mean, your skill sets didn't exist then, and in the 60s and 70s, like you said,
Sure.
and the adoptive qualities of my life that impacted me. But then as I came from that messiness into sobriety, into cleaning up the healing from the sexual abuse, and then eventually really coming into my own to understand, gosh, this adoption piece is something I should look at. You know what? The funny thing was, as I healed, the healing was messy too, really
Sure.
messy.
Because
How
there's
do
layers.
there's those layers. Talk about that. Talk about the layers of messiness.
Well, the layers start for many of us that are adopted at conception. That they back in our day they called that the girl got in trouble. So we were in trouble. And so the trouble causes cortisol through the mother's body, which goes through our body, which has lots of effects. As tiny babies were removed, we don't know where we are, so the trauma starts. I mean, for me, at conception, I'm sure for many, but I can speak to my own experience. So we get stuck in that tiny baby can't find her voice place. Often I will work with adults and myself too that they're trying to explain something that they're feeling, but they can't get the words out. It almost seems like they're stuck in their throat. And that's coming from their tiny child experience where we don't have the vernacular, the language to explain really adult feelings. So we're stuck in that place. So when I work with adults that are stuck in that place, we'll bring out some sand tray, we'll do some nonverbal processing. And it's very helpful to be able to do some somatic work, some processing that we don't have to use words to be able to describe what that feeling is.
Can I bring you to a place that maybe you're familiar with, of course, I think clinically, and maybe it's something you practice also. I know you work with youth quite often. I'm
Hmm.
going to talk about 59-year-old adoptees and
Yeah.
53-year-old adoptees and 45-year-old adoptees. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I, as you know, searched and found my biological mother,
Hmm.
and I have two brothers and a sister. That was in 2007. And I'm here to say in 2021, I have found my biological father.
Wow.
And it just
That's
happened
big.
just about 2 weeks ago.
Hmm.
The dots, the stars aligned and the dots connected. And
Hmm.
I can't talk about it much because of privacy issues right now, but I'm
Sure.
starting to feel like I can give myself permission to at least put the
Hmm.
picture out.
Hmm.
I have also, so I found my father, and just like when I found my mother, I found a grave. He passed away in
Mm.
2015. Um, but boy, you talk about messy.
Yeah.
I also have a sister who's 53 who did not know that the father she was raised believing was her father was not her father. And now
Mm.
we've discovered through all the research and DNA
Yeah.
and that she now knows that our father was somebody else. I
Hmm.
have another sister who's 45, and she actually was raised thinking also that her stepfather was her father, but
Hmm.
was a man in her life the whole time.
Wow.
And it was just Mr. Jones. That's not his name,
Yeah.
but Mr. Jones. And at 17, she said, "Why are you always so nice to me? I think I'm your father." They did a
Hmm.
paternity test, and that's how we connected the dots. I did my sibling DNA test with her.
Right.
We all found each other, and it has been, wow, messy.
A
The
whirlwind too, it sounds like.
Well, and really exciting in many ways. I mean, the energy that I can tell you is just at full volume,
Hmm.
morning, noon, and night, right? For me and for them is extraordinary. Now, the difference, I think, and this is what I wanted to ask you, is I've done some of this before. In 2005, I started my search for my mother. In
Sure.
2007, I found my mother. So all that 2 year of searching, that was a real learning process. And
Hmm.
really, you got to be, the whole thing about searching is, you learn about yourself as you're searching. And then since then, from 2007 till now, I've just been in relationship. I've gone through all these
Hmm.
highs and lows. So the real interesting part is that I found myself to be anchored in a real sense of stability for my new sisters.
Hmm.
And we are getting along so wonderfully, sometimes extraordinarily wonderfully. And there's all complicated stuff that I
Hmm.
don't want to talk about here, but it gets
Sure.
pretty messy, as they say.
But it
But the
also sounds like you have a common theme of trying to figure it out. Like they didn't know things that they found out that you've already kind of been grounded in, like the search and the um, who am I really kind of feeling. And there you can be a foundation for them to help them navigate some of that.
That's exactly right. And it's funny because, and that's what I was going to lead to. Damon was interviewing me a while ago for his
Mm,
podcast, Who Am I Really? And that's the first time I'd spoke about this publicly because it was just kind of coming to
yeah.
fruition. It's funny though, because I have been that kind of sounding board for both of them. And you're right.
Mm,
My one sister always wondered, what was something didn't feel right, really, literally.
yeah.
And, is actually right now having a conversation, literally as we're talking, is having a conversation with that person, with the father
Mm,
she believed, not to like submit these ideas to him, but to just kind of put some closure on that, because there was a lot of things that just didn't feel right. And now they started to feel right.
right.
It was the understanding was clearer. And I think that it's important for me to remember too, though, and this is incredibly important. That's why I wanted to ask you. I may feel really stable, but I'm going through it with them
Hmm.
too. I may have all
Yeah.
this experience, but it's not just head experience, it's heart experience. And and yet I feel like I'm just, wired for sound right now.
Hmm.
Tell us about that experience. Like this is just, even though I've gone through it before, it's always just so new. It's so
Well, it brings
wonderful.
it all back to you. Your own experience is now back in the forefront of your mind and your body. And we're not just heads floating around. We have this whole body that has this nervous system that gets charged up. And you may be in that kind of fight or flight, that excitement feeling. It's not always a negative, like we're not fighting or getting away from something, but it's also that adrenaline rush and that um, humans like a story. Like we like to be involved in figuring something out. And maybe the story isn't the truth, it's still a story. And we're trying to put the pieces together to figure out the puzzle. And that's what you're involved in, is all of that kind of excitement, nervous energy that you don't know what's around the corner, kind of feeling what's going to happen next. And you're supporting, but you're reliving some of your own experience
There,
because
there
it's in
is.
your cells, it's in your body.
That's right. And I'm so grateful
Mhm,
you're talking about the central nervous system and dopamine and cortisol, everything going through my system is a chemical reaction.
mhm,
And luckily, I think for me and for my sisters, we're all adults now. We all have tools. And some of
mhm,
us are better versed at doing deep breathing or mindfulness or meditation or different things. But the
mhm.
majority of what I'm seeing is that we didn't grow up together. So we're not negotiating this as children, which has a certain sense of serendipity, or
Mhm.
just, this the chaos of being children, which you go, oh, sure, I'm fighting with you, I'm happy with you,
Yeah,
now let's go eat. But we're as adults, how do adults differ from children in reunion?
I don't think I think that we're also children on the inside. We have those childlike parts that have that feeling of this feels very small, and this feels like I'm about five, and this feels I can't figure it out. And we don't give ourselves enough credit for still having those childlike parts. We want to push all that away because I'm a grown up person. I shouldn't have these. We should on ourselves. We shouldn't be having these feelings of I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm all of those things. I'm excited like it's Christmas morning. We think those are childlike experiences, but adults continue to live out their childhood in adult ways, but still feeling like a child.
Is there truth then to that sense that I'm having and that people have talked to me about, is that trying to squash that causes distress?
What
And
you resist persists.
say it again.
What you resist persists. So you're
Ah,
squashing down those feelings. They're like, oh no, I'm coming back up. You're like, I don't want those. Let them come to you. Let them be present.
wow. Yeah, I always think of it like I'm throwing an elbow, like, geez,
Your body checking them in hockey.
yeah, I think so. I'm just gonna get out of there,
But they
and
body
that's what I,
check right back.
but right. And so what I realized was, and I was talking to my sister about this. I was like, I just dropped, I just need to drop my elbows.
Mhm.
And then, sure, it's messy, but it's my messy.
But if we can make a little bit of space between our resistance and what's coming to us, and we can live in that little bit of space and take a breath, things become less need for elbows.
Is there a danger for children or adults or just any of us that are in this process of getting too excited and being overwhelmed? And not only that, but this is the big one. When you're that excited, you kind of almost want to hold on to it after a while. When you
Sure.
stop elbowing it, you're like, geez, this is joy. This is bliss.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I don't want it to end. And it's going to change, isn't it?
It is. It's kind of like when you get something brand new, like when you have a new car, that's like the best. And you like love to drive it, but then after a while, it's like, oh, I have to just run to the store, or oh, I just have to, you know. I remember when I was first in reunion, it's like I had a new puppy and I couldn't get enough of it. And then after a while, it's like the dog is big and now it's chewing on things. So it's like that whole feeling.
If my sisters are watching this, they're going to be like, I'm not a puppy.
But it's that feeling, right? You get super excited about something new, a puppy, and then the dog matures and it doesn't need as much attention and it can manage things on its own. And yeah, and just to realize, your excitement is real and it's palpable, but it may be overwhelming for the person you're excited about. Because now there's this new person that's shown up in their life, and you're my what? You're my brother? I didn't know about you. And it's a lot for them too. So being gentle for both of you is really important and not overwhelming.
There's four words that I've kept in my mind, even if I don't say them, and I have said them,
Hmm.
because there's some, and we're going to get to this now. There is some awful grief going on in both of
Mm,
my sister's lives. One is
sure.
has to do with illness. The other one has to do with a recent death. And I just happened to find them in the midst of, boy,
Hmm.
it's not just messy. I
Yeah.
don't, that wouldn't be the appropriate word. It's traumatic. It's
There's no
trauma.
good time for a reunion to just happen, for somebody to pop up in your life.
So several months ago, a friend of mine died, dear, dear friend Nancy, and she
Mm,
was elderly, but still had some more life going, but she had a lung issue. And I posted it on Facebook, just one of those things where I was sad and I posted it. And a lot of people threw condolences, and probably you, and others.
mm,
Somebody, I don't really want to name them, and it wasn't somebody I knew well, said four words, just typed four words and posted it. I
mm,
sit with you.
that's
I,
big.
I sobbed uncontrollably when I read that. And I have now incorporated that because when I'm with my sisters, they're going through a lot, but even if they're going through a lot in the happiness,
Mhm.
it's not one thing or another. They can be full of joy at knowing me and full of grief and with the trauma.
Sure.
And they can also have the joy of knowing me and the trauma of knowing that this changed
Mhm.
everything and the sadness. And my version of my role in this, much of it is to be quiet, to
And
listen,
just to sit with them.
just to be here.
I'm present. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been able to learn that through other people giving that to me. I would say,
Mhm.
the most important thing that I've ever given to someone else was freely given to me, which is I love you and I'll never ever leave you.
Mhm.
Those words were spoken to me. It just it pulled every
Yeah.
neurological wire I ever had and said,
Mhm.
yeah, we're going from that moment on, my life changed in a way that I never could have
Yeah.
experienced.
It spoke to tiny baby Kevin who didn't get that.
That's right. I love you. I heard I love you a lot. I'll
Mhm.
never ever leave you.
Yeah.
I love you and I'll never ever leave you. I didn't
Mhm.
believe it. It's
Yeah.
taken 35 years to, really, literally.
To
So,
assimilate that into your body.
right. And so I do want to go there because we're going to chat about grief.
Mhm.
There's that loss that we're talking about underlies everything that, we're reunions
Mhm.
and unions, and it's it's layered on top of a grief that is most likely almost inexplicable for people who have not been adopted or have any kind of these kind of traumas. For someone like me that was adopted, sexually abused at 9 and raped in the in the adolescent years of my life, and also had drugs and alcohol addiction, horrible kind of stuff, really hard stuff. The idea of the grief that that was the foundation of my life was profound, but it also made me feel unworthy. And so I wanted you to just open up your textbook there if you want, or your heart or your
Textbook.
mind. You just talk about whatever you want and let us know. The grief is one part of the unworthiness. And the unworthiness is a part that I find the grief has to be processed. The unworthiness has to be, I don't want to use this word too harshly, but dealt with. It has to be addressed because without that change in my understanding of my worth and my value, uh, I was at a loss as to how to have relationships with anyone, much less people I might find in reunion.
Mhm. I'm gonna say something a little earth-shattering, maybe. I don't know. This is what has helped me is what if I was worthy of love and belonging all along? What if we all were? And we are. That tiny baby that went out one door and my mother went out the other door was worthy of love and belonging. Not being wanted by her had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with her. I did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. None of us did anything wrong. We're not bad and we've done nothing wrong. We were born into a situation to a woman in many people's situations that just could not keep us for whatever reason, and we did nothing wrong, and we're all worthy of love and belonging. I have a little baby picture of myself the first day I came to my parents' home, and I use that in presentations now, and it looks like a little frozen child in this car seat kind of thing in a playpen with all these toys around, and I have no expression on my face, and I put the words worthy of love and belonging because I am, even though I looked that scared and nervous and frozen. As a tiny baby, we are worthy of love and belonging, and that doesn't stop because we're grown-ups. Period.
When I saw that and I've known you for a while, and when I read it out loud today, that you not only work with adoption, you worked with sexual abuse victims.
Mhm.
And the layers of trauma on top of the layers of trauma is, we talk about
Mhm.
onions.
Sure.
It's like a bag of onions sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, sometimes we're not just one onion, there's a lot of different onions we try to peel. And I know for me it really happened in a way that was almost odd in my way. I was adopted first, then was abused, then fell into addiction, and the first thing I
Mhm.
dealt with was the addiction, then the abuse, and many years.
Backwards. Yeah.
It was really this unbelievable unwinding. It didn't feel like an onion.
Mhm.
It just felt like, going, it takes a long time to get into the forest. It took a long time to get back out. And I couldn't circumvent that. But everyone has a different path. And they understanding that I have in my time now as an adult is that the process of searching and of looking at the adoption piece and of looking at that, I had to be ready for that. I think a lot of, I see, especially in the day and age of social media and Facebook and all the DNA testing, that it can go awfully quickly sometimes.
Right.
And that's, I don't know, if is there a danger for that, or is there a process that I think you could share about that would maybe help our listeners who might be thinking about reunion or even in the process of searching?
Hmm.
I see that all the time on Facebook. I looked for them, I found them. What do I do? And
Right.
that's kind of like, I'm thinking about looking for them is what I did. People helped me to understand, and the best thing I ever heard was, the process of looking is, it's about the search itself is where you get ready to
Hmm.
find. And there's a lot that I had to do, and I was grateful that it was 2005 and Facebook wasn't crazy, and I couldn't find quickly. Sad, but it
Hmm.
really helped me to prepare.
Yeah.
Anything that you want to share on that?
Well, I searched for 25 years. I tried to get laws changed in my state to get my original birth certificate. I had my non-identifying information. I knew some things about myself and where I came from, but it was DNA testing that really did it. And once I had a cousin contact me through Ancestry, it was from that first message. 45 minutes later, I was talking to my biological mother, and I wasn't prepared. Nobody, no, there's no manual. I mean, I'm sure there's a manual now, but I didn't have one at my fingertips. And so it moved too quickly, and it flooded me. It flooded me with a lot of emotions. Um, it's like I said, the new puppy feeling. We want to play with it so much, and we just want to know everything immediately. And I was in the Facebook era where I found everyone quickly. Even while I was on the phone with my mother, I was on Facebook looking at people. So we do that. We do what we do as humans because we want to know. Many adoptees our age in our era have spent so many years thinking and wanting and desiring to know where we came from because it's our right to know our story. And the story doesn't have to define us. What's important is the story we tell ourselves about the story. So I have a story that, I said go out one door and my mother went out the other. That story that I told myself is I was unwanted all those years, and that's not the truth. We have to be really careful about what we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so getting flooded with all those emotions and all of that happens so quickly. I think many of us go through that. And if we can, it's really hard. I can't imagine I could have done it any differently. Now I'm 4 years past, but if we can take a step back and take a breath and just wait a minute and just process things a little slower, um, it might be easier on our nervous system to be able to regulate. And even saying that, I can't imagine it being easy to take a breath once you finally have the information.
I hear what you're saying, and I think for both your case and mine, it took me many years, and it's taken me
Hmm.
even many years longer to find my mother and then now my father. And it's this incredible, when it happens, it's always too fast. Even if it took years,
Hmm.
it's when it happens, and it just seemed to happen that way. Like I was waiting, I'd given up. I don't know about you, but I had given up so many times, even with
Sure,
the
I had to,
DNA.
of course.
Yeah, and people would, I hate to use the phrase, but people would ghost me and, ghost me here and ghost me
Hmm.
there. And finally I just got used to that. And that was a good part of the process though, because, I started to be okay with that. It may keep me up for an hour or two at night, but then the next night I got a good night's sleep
Hmm.
and I got better
Yeah,
at that. So the process of not dealing with rejections, not, I
it's a
mean,
practice. You have
it's
to
practice.
practice that. Yeah,
And then when it happens, it's boom. And you say, oh God, that was too
yeah,
fast. Now what do I do?
yeah.
But here's the big thing I was thinking about the whole time is if I'm in community with other adoptees and other
Hmm.
support systems, it's not going to be any easier when it happens. But the
Right.
first thing I did when I knew that the DNA was coming to really a conclusion, I said, boy, the sibling tests are in the mail. They are now in Washington. They're at the lab. I mean,
Hmm. Yeah,
I'm on my phone tracing
technology is
this.
amazing.
Yes. And I'm like, okay, I can see them in my mind doing these little DNA things and everything,
Hmm.
testing stuff. And I realized I could feel the tsunami hitting me. I just felt it.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
called up several people that, and not my sisters, although I told them what was going on and how I felt, but I called up other people and I told my wife and I told my 12-step sponsor and I told some of my best friends. I said, I'm okay, but I don't think I'm going to be okay. And I know I'm going to be okay, but I don't feel that way. And
Hmm.
I need to know. I need you to know what's happening with me because I need to know that you've got my back.
Mhm.
That's all I need. You don't have to do anything. Just me telling you, I feel now the tsunami can hit me and I can allow it to knock me back because you're going to help me stand back up.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think that that's part of the thing that I'm really trying to get at here is that if anyone is in the process, we're here, all of us.
Mhm. Yeah.
We can't really drive to your house sometimes or even get on the phone or but literally knowing that we're here and we have your back, whether it's on social media or a
Mhm.
therapist or groups that we're involved in or whatever, that is just such a understandable thing for me. I need somebody to have my back now. I can't do and don't want to do this alone.
Right. We need support.
The
Yeah.
the most important thing that I have learned recently is that I can find happiness. We started earlier when we were chatting, and I said, how you doing, Kevin? You said, I said, happy, and I'm happy.
Happy.
I'm
It's like you
happy.
almost had to like say it small because you
Yeah,
weren't sure you're allowed to
yeah.
be.
Well, I find when I say that to people and they say, "Oh, good," and they look at me, and I understand this because that's what I did. They said, "I'm content," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm content, and I'm happy."
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's this incredible willingness I have now to literally look forward in the future. And it has partially to do with, of course, when I found who my father was, the last piece of the puzzle was there. I was
Mm.
done. I've never felt like that. On November 9th, I woke up in the morning still not knowing everything. November
It's my
9th at
birthday.
no, November 9th?
It's my birthday. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how would I have not known that? It's beautiful.
It's
So that's when I found out who I was. On your birthday, which felt like my birthday.
It was a gift.
Yes, and
Yeah.
then November 10th, I woke up and it was the first day of my whole life. I didn't have any questions. There was a lot
Mm.
that I would know, I'm sure, but it's almost
Sure.
like nieces, nephews, cousins, things like that. But I had no more
Mhm.
questions, and I've never had that feeling in my life. It was super, super.
It's like you can just exhale. You've been holding this breath forever and you let it go.
Felt good,
Very
didn't it?
good. Nice exhale.
My therapist, Christina, if she's watching this right now, my therapist would be very happy because I'll be in therapy and she'll see me. We don't do it face to
Holding your
face anymore,
breath.
but
Yeah.
I'll be talking and she'll see me and I'll say, and I won't even know I'm doing it. And she'll say, "Good, Kevin."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes me feel so proud of myself.
I'm glad she's paying close attention to even your breath.
She's in
It's
Phoenix now.
perfect.
She's in
Oh.
Phoenix. She moved to Phoenix. She was my local
Mhm.
therapist for a long time and comes here for the summers, of course. And but we're all online. It does. She pays close attention to the breath. I learned that unfortunately when my father passed away. My adoptive father died 11 years ago now, right in October,
Mhm.
and I thought I did okay with it. I really did, because he and I had a lot of, we were at each other most of our lives, and it was
Sure.
a rough childhood. But in the end, I loved him very much, and I knew he loved me, and I thought I was okay when he died, and I wasn't. And over the next
Mhm.
year, you know what happened. I mean, I thought I was grappling with it well, and I felt like I was functioning well, but the
Yeah.
depression set in, and I'd never been clinically depressed before, and I
Mhm.
became clinically depressed. And you can talk about that if you'd like, because I think the hardest thing about it was when you're clinically depressed, you're not sure that you're clinically depressed. There's
Well, because you're still functioning mostly,
mostly.
but life feels heavy, like you're walking through peanut butter.
It got to the deep end of that with suicidal thoughts, and
Sure.
anyone's triggered by this, just take a breath right now. And it really did have that effect on me, where I thought there was no option but to
Mhm.
leave, to execute the
Sure.
suicide and to finish it, complete it. And thank goodness I did not, and reached out for help. But the hardest thing was saying the word. The hardest thing was saying I'm
Mhm.
suicidal. I'm having
Yeah.
suicidal thoughts. I'm feeling like I can't stay here anymore. And once I got the
Mhm.
words out, guess what? I haven't had those thoughts since.
It's like an exhale. Yeah.
It's like an exhale.
People in my profession and just in general, the word suicide is terrifying. And if we talk about it, it lets some of the steam out. It's like a pressure cooker, it just relaxes.
That's right. It's one of the reasons
Mhm.
why we do these conversations. And it is the reason this YouTube channel exists, is because we don't talk about heavy things all the time. Well, we do,
Yeah.
but we don't always just focus on them. But the bottom line is to destigmatize. I don't think we can demystify them, and I don't want to
Mhm.
reduce that. I don't want to make them just commonplace conversations like, we just joke about them.
Sure.
But to demystify is one thing, but to destigmatize and allow
Mhm.
these words, allow the topics of adoption and adoptee trauma and pieces of this to be just talked about so we can listen to each other. Child sexual abuse is very difficult to speak of for many people, especially anyone who's been abused. And then we
Mhm.
get to do this in ways that we see each other being healthy in the conversations. And of course, the real pieces that we were just talking about, things like suicide and things like that, those are so difficult to broach. But once we have, you're right, it lets the steam out a little bit.
It takes the power away from the word and the feeling and gives the power back to us as people.
And again, you're right. It brings the power back to me with you. I'm not doing it by myself.
Yes.
I can't
With
when I sit in a room alone and say I'm feeling suicidal. That's not the same thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. When you can share that with a trusted person, somebody that's going to, as you say, have your back, it's really important.
Talk to me a little bit about that. That's a wonderful segue here to the trusted person. We have a very, very diverse world right now where you can find connections almost anywhere and still feel connectedless.
Mhm.
So how is that a struggle for a lot of the people maybe that you work with or for you personally?
Yeah. Yesterday I went to a local art show because it was Small Business Saturday. So I went and supported some local artists and I bought a print. I wish I had it with me. I would show it to you, but it says, um, even, it says, our loneliness brings us to connection. So a lot of adoptees connecting online is because we're lonely, but we go looking for somebody that's had a shared experience. When we can bring those emotions to another person and that person can say, yes, me too, that's where the connection happens. And we're wired for connection. Humans are wired to be with other people. Um, we're wired to have those intimate relationships. I'm not talking sexual intimacy, I'm talking emotional intimacy that can happen in a therapist client relationship, husband, wife, partners, best friends. Those kinds of relationships are really important. And if we can cultivate those and we can find that person in our life that we can share those things with, we are better together. I like that phrase, better together.
It is a good one. Better together. Yeah, we will. Let's vote on that one. I vote better
I vote
together.
too. Yeah,
I,
but I just, when I saw that print, we're connected even in our loneliness. That really stood out to me.
it's okay to feel lonely. Loneliness
Hmm.
is one thing
It's
I had to
kind of
learn was
normal.
what's that?
It's normal for us to
Yes,
feel lonely,
that's right.
especially as adoptees. When I was in high school, I wrote a poem where I said, I can't remember the exact way I wrote it, but um, I was I'm on the middle seat in the middle of a noisy school bus, but I'm all alone. And that's how I felt growing up because I didn't fit. I felt like I didn't fit anywhere. But once I found where I fit, and it wasn't in the adopted community first, it was in relationship with women, with a group that I am close to still. It was with my husband who I chose to marry. It was with my family, and then expanded to the adopted community. I can still feel lonely in a room of people, but I know other people do too, and it's less lonely. It's kind of a weird thing to feel that way.
I think I've never, I mean, I think I know that, but the way you just put that was really helpful and enlightening to me.
Mm,
Knowing that
good.
I'm lonely in a room and there are other people here that are lonely too, even if none
Hmm.
of us are really acknowledging that. It's
Yeah.
just a fact. It really, and the difference is, and this is the way I've always learned through the 12-step world, because, that's been helpful for me. Like that's the first
Hmm.
community I found. Um, I can feel lonely, but I'm never alone. Not again,
Right.
right?
Right.
I'm never alone.
Hmm.
That's the choice that I can make. I cannot choose whether to feel lonely or not. That's going
Yeah.
to come.
And what if loneliness is really grief? Because I think it is.
There's that wonderful movie, what's it called? Inside Out, the Pixar movie, I think
Oh,
it
I
is.
love it. It's one
Oh,
of
I
my
love it.
favorites.
Oh my God, I
Yeah.
cry every time. I cry every single time. And that's just it. It's like you can have the lonely and the joy. I can
Hmm.
be both things. I can be many things. And then I can say, well, yeah, I feel lonely, but I don't have to be alone, do I? No. And even when I reach out to you, I may still have that sense of loneliness,
Sure.
and that can be okay. I don't have to try to do
Mhm.
something to reduce my loneliness. I know that this will pass. That's one more important thing that I've learned over the years is that little catchphrase, that bumper sticker, which some people don't like bumper stickers, but I find them helpful sometimes. This too shall pass. This too shall
Yes.
pass.
I have a therapist colleague who has a little sign in her office. This too shall pass, and then dot dot dot. Now would be nice.
Well,
I like that.
my favorite one is, the patience prayer, the prayer for patience.
Mm-mm.
God, grant me patience, and I want it right now.
Right? Yeah.
And that's if we can do that, the dot dot dot, and have a little laugh about it,
Space between.
that's letting some of that steam out. That's
Yeah.
letting
Space
some of
between.
that, because I think, we'll go back to reunion for a minute. The expectations, right, are that this will go right. We will do this right.
Oh,
And
sure.
this is, we have this. And I do know that one of the things that helped me a great deal is people would say, let's talk about the various scenarios that could happen in finding your family, your mother
Hmm.
specifically, because that's all I dared look for. And I have to say that what I did was I really, really focused on reducing my expectations, not my hopes, not my dreams. I allowed my fantasies to run wild. They'd been there since I was so little. That would be the squashing down. I realized that was not appropriate, because my dream was to sit with her. Still makes me tear up, to sit with
Yeah.
her in a
Sure.
field in the summer, and she's playing guitar, and she's singing to me, and it didn't
It's
matter.
a big fantasy picture
Yeah,
you created for yourself.
it was, and I had it since I was
Mhm.
probably very little,
Yeah.
before I remember remembering, and I wasn't going to squash that down. But my expectations had to be really not narrow and not small, but just more quiet. The one thing I had said was, if I could just have a picture of her around the time that I was
Yeah.
born, I'd be
Yeah.
happy. That would be enough. Just that would be enough, because I had nothing. And I think that's important to recognize. From nothing to something is quantum leaps.
Hmm. Hmm. It's
When
beautiful.
I ask you about siblings, it's natural for me to want to focus on my own sibling
Hmm.
interactions. You talked about the real intimacy. Now, we, we crave that. There's a craving for that. And it's not always reciprocated, and sometimes it's wildly reciprocated. My
Hmm.
two brothers and sister, James, John, and Julie, I'm close to all of them. We had the same mom, and I love them all. And I can say that I love Julie. Hi, Julie. And I could wrap my arms around her, and we have a specific relationship. And John and I can just, give those manly hugs and,
Yeah.
fist bump. And James and I are just like soulmates. And having that understanding that the intimacy is going to be different with each person you meet, and is now with my two wonderful sisters. Hi,
Hmm.
guys. Can't say their names yet.
Hmm.
And, it's really cool to understand that now. And I know that's something they're going to be learning is, because they haven't even met each other yet.
Hmm.
They literally right now they're 12 minutes away from each other, but there's so much going on in each
Wow.
other's life. We're
It's
all
wild,
waiting.
isn't it?
Yeah, well, we're waiting for things to be more not appropriate or timely, but now that we know who each other are, it doesn't seem as much of a rush now.
You taking time to take a breath instead of rushing into something that could be too much,
Too
too
much.
flooding. Hmm.
And it is too flooding as it is, isn't it? I mean, my goodness,
Yeah.
we're just kind of like the dam's already broken open. The flood
Yeah.
is happening. We're just not diving into the
Right.
floodwaters. Does that make
Yeah. You're
sense?
getting to higher ground where it's a little safer until it
Little.
feels good to get
Talk
in
to me
there.
about that, because I'd love to hear about that
Hmm.
personally. I know I'm not going to ask you to do psychotherapy on me, even though you're a
Hmm.
wonderful psychotherapist, but just talk to me about that personally so that our listeners can really understand what that means. Going to higher ground.
Hmm. You know, I I would love to have a closer relationship with my siblings. It would be great, and we're just not those people. I am on higher ground because it's kind of like self-preservation. I know if I put too much effort and too much into it, and there's disappointment, it will be too much for me. So recognizing our own ability to engage in what we need and self-care and self-preservation to be up on higher ground and be present. I'm a deep well, and if you come to me, I'm going to give you what I have, but I'm not going to give you everything. I just can't. I have to have a boundary. And I met my sister. I never met my sister, but I found her immediately. She was the one I found on Facebook while I was talking to my mother, and we had this whirlwind relationship. And she died 38 days after I found her, and so that devastated me. Makes me really gun shy about wanting to get close and allowing myself to open my heart again to other siblings. And I've taken it slow, and I give what I can, and I ask for what I need if I need anything. um, and lots of people are like that, to stay up on the higher ground, um, and be able to kind of have some self-preservation around it all, because not every sibling is going to be healthy to have a relationship with.
Well, that's the word I was looking for too, is the self-preservation. You talked about
Yeah,
boundaries and higher
yeah.
ground. I'm going to use a little, I think it's right. I've heard it or seen it on some posters or something. Build hedges, not walls.
Mm, right.
Okay, I'm really going to ask you
Oh,
to
I like
define.
that. Mhm.
Yeah, because the idea is the boundaries, the word boundaries seems so concrete, literally, and they
Mhm.
seem they seem very tangible and they seem inflexible in some ways. But the
And for
hedges,
some, there's no such thing. Like, we're all in, we're enmeshed immediately.
talk about that because, things can go well, right? Where it's the enmeshed or the really closeness that people feel, because there can be
Hmm.
an intensity to
Yeah.
that. You don't want to just rip that apart, right? Because there's some real joy and specific
Hmm.
benefits, I say. There's some specific wonderment in being close. But what are the risks involved there and how do we negotiate those?
Sometimes the person you want to be close to, because you are treating them like the new puppy, I'll go back to that, they get overwhelmed and they're like, oh, this is too much. And then they ghost you, or they cut it off, or they put up the wall instead of a hedge. So having that boundary and keeping it safe, even for yourself, helps to build a relationship instead of rushing in with everything and flooding them with your whole life story and wanting them to be, come to my house, let's visit, let's get together, let's fly across the world, whatever it is. Taking things slow and taking a breath. um, in my situation, I wish I would have done that, but I might have missed out on a lot too.
True.
So I can not I mean, I coulda, shoulda, woulda all over myself, but I can't. It
Oh
is what it
God.
is.
It's exactly how I feel. I found my mother in 2007. She died in 1997. If I had kept looking from that point
Yeah.
on, like she was dead, so she couldn't tell me who my father was,
Mhm, mhm.
and no one knew. No one knew. Almost no one knew
Yeah.
about me. Only one human being, my sister Julie, even our mother had told. She never told my
Mhm,
brothers or my
mhm.
uncles. The
Yeah.
only one that knew had died. So the information about my father went to her grave, and then I could have kept looking, and that was 2007. And I said, no, I've got enough right now. This is enough. I needed,
Mhm,
but it wasn't because I was done. It was because I needed to self-care,
mhm.
self-preserve.
Yeah.
And
You needed
also
to grieve. You needed to grieve what you
yeah,
found, or what you didn't find even.
I needed two things. You're right, to grieve what I found and didn't find. And also, if I just ran forward to look for my father and that can become all consuming,
Mhm.
how am I going to have time for my new brothers and my sister, right? These
Yeah.
people that I want to have. So that was really wonderful. Unfortunately, I didn't look in some ways because he was alive then and he died in
Mm,
2015.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
8 years I could have been searching and I didn't. Talk about that, because for me, I'll tell you, I found two graves. And if I had, we all do that, right? Many of us say, why didn't she find me? Why
Mhm.
didn't I look for
Sure.
her? The typical reason is because we sit there. I know my mother did, and I did too, and I've been told she did. I don't feel it's my right to infiltrate their life, but I'll
Mhm.
be here if they ever want to find me.
Yeah. And many of them were told to forget it, forget that you had a baby, just, go on with your life. So my mother did. I had to remind her where I was born and what year. She couldn't remember.
Wow. How do you deal with, how do you understand and deal with, how do you personally and how do you talk to your clients about avoiding
Sure.
regret? Avoiding
Mm.
regret.
Bringing compassion and love to that feeling of regret, our own compassion for our own feelings. You know, love is really the equalizer in everything. If we can bring love to the situation for ourselves, and for what, in my situation, what my mother went through at that time, I have a lot of information now. I really get it. I can bring love to that story, and I can hold it with compassion, without judgment, and I can look at it, and I can look at her, and I can look at the situation and the era with love and compassion. It's a lot of work. Some days I'm like, this is BS. I don't want to do any of it. I don't blah blah blah. Other days I'm like, I really hold her in love and compassion, imperfect as she was.
I'm so glad you
In my
used that.
own love and compassion.
Yeah.
It's a gift to myself.
I'm so glad we are we found our way here. Many
Mm-hmm.
years ago, quite a few years back, my wife and I, Ellie and I, took a mindfulness MBSR class, mindfulness-based
Mm-hmm.
stress reduction, and it changed
Mm-hmm.
my life because I started really. I was always meditating, but I became a practitioner of mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So last
Which
year,
is
there
different than meditation,
very different.
because those of us with monkey minds, meditation is very shaming because we can't quiet our mind enough. But mindfulness is different. So I just want to throw that out there.
It was wonderful because I do it every day and
Mm-hmm.
pretty ritualistically or habitually now, and but I can do it every night, and I could do it when I found my siblings, and I have different tools at hand. I do 4 breaths in, hold for 4 breaths out. That's
Mm-hmm.
a thing that I learned. But then I pray. That's my thing. I have some prayers, and then the third thing that I go right to is the mindfulness, and I'm able to then watch the thoughts, let them
Right.
experience, and let
I
them.
describe that as like the end of the movie when the words go by.
Nice,
That's what it's
nice,
like. Yeah, you just
nice.
watch the
And
words go
some of them
by.
I pay attention to a little bit more, but when they go off the screen, just let them go off the screen.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. A lot of times
Yeah.
people refer to it as leaves in a river. You can watch the leaf when
They
they're
float
flowing.
by.
So here's the end of that story, though. So many years I'm practicing mindfulness. Last year, I'm right here at this area, and COVID's keeping me at home. And there was a class that came up, and I thought it was a mindfulness. I said, I need a mindfulness refresher, something to do. So I signed up for it, forgot about it. A couple months later, the mindfulness came up on my calendar, and I clicked in, and I'm sitting here right here in this spot,
Uh-huh.
probably right in this chair. And she said, thank you all for coming. Welcome to the mindfulness self-compassion class. And I
Yeah.
said, oh, leave meeting, let me out of here. Because
Yeah,
I wasn't.
Kristen Neff and self-compassion is
That's
a
right.
deal changer.
That's right. And that's exactly what the person that led the class, that was a practitioner of that. And I kind of held my breath, grit my teeth a little bit, and said, okay, Kevin, practice mindfulness in the mindfulness self-compassion class, because self-compassion was something that I was really hesitant to grapple with. I'm very.
This is not a. I'm going to show you something. This is not a. Hey, go buy this and sign on. Make it.
No,
I just
no,
happen to
cool.
have it right here. Oops, I'm
Pull
on
pull it
blur.
back a
Let me
little bit.
unblur
Yeah,
myself.
that's okay. That's it. Oh, there it is. Perfect. The Mindfulness Self-Compassion Workbook. And who's that by again?
Kristen Neff. It's
That's
right.
her
I mean,
book.
it's just sitting here on my desk,
And
and I
that
use
is
it for myself.
and that is the class that I took. It wasn't her teaching, it was someone else who had
Yeah,
taken it, was a practitioner. And it was wonderful. And I'm not going to go through the whole class, but the point is
sure.
that I understand how to be empathetic and compassionate to others.
Hmm.
I also, through that class, started to learn the difference between empathy and compassion, which was profound for me, right?
Big
Basics,
difference, right?
right? Empathy, I feel your pain, and I'm going to use my own phrase. Compassion, I sit with you. I'm
Hmm.
here. I'm going to let you have your feelings, and I'm going to have compassion for that. Self-compassion was a real tricky one for me.
Because we don't feel like we deserve that.
Again,
It
back to
goes back
worth.
to the we're a problem as a tiny baby, and we're not. We're worthy of love and belonging.
So I'm glad that we've reached this sense of understanding for myself, and you got the workbook, and I think that anyone who's listening or watching this, and I'm going to put a link down below in the notes to the workbook that
Yeah.
and the information there. These aren't paths that anyone has to travel, but it's paths that you can. And if any, I know for me, I just didn't believe the joy I have in my life would ever be possible. Never. I really could
Yeah.
not have envisioned this and wouldn't dare. And now I really believe that I'm looking forward to my future in ways totally in ways that I never thought were possible. I really look
And you
forward to the
deserve
rest.
every moment of it. You deserve it.
I do. And I've sometimes I even say I've earned this. It's a lovely way to finally own it. Say, yep, I've
Yeah.
done the work, and I'm going to continue to do the work. I'm not sitting back with a cup of decaf coffee watching the birds. I do that daily, but
Yeah.
I don't only do that. I continue to want to grow, but I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to the rest of my life. And any of us can try to walk that walk and try to get to the best place we can be. and we can do it together. But I am so grateful that we had this time today. It's been so much
Yeah.
fun. J-
Yes, I agree.
Janet Nordine has lived in Las Vegas her entire life. She has a Bachelor of Science in Human Services Management, Master of Science in Counseling, Marriage, Family, and Child Therapy. She's a Registered Play Therapist Supervisor, a trust-based relational intervention practitioner. She works with children who have experienced sexual abuse and incorporates play therapy with children who are adopted and their families of origin. Janet incorporates interpersonal neurobiology and the bottom up approach with children and adolescents. Again, Janet, what a wonderful friend, what a wonderful fellow adoptee, and a wonderful human being. Thank you for joining us in conversation with.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
We'll see you soon, right?
Yes.